low pulsating hum droned through the city, filling the air, boring into every mind and bending every single person to its mechanical will. Men and women, adults and children, rich and poor. In just a few minutes, the entire population submitted to Heimdall's power. From then on, people thought, felt, wished, and did only what was required of them. Is a cult of personality really such a bad thing? After all, if someone receives praise to the high heavens, doesn't that mean that they deserve it? The mindless worship of the wise leader was replaced by the blind adoration of Evan Redgrave. And if citizens had previously been able to afford to express their disapproval of the current state of affairs even in a whisper, now no one would have dared to do so, because having one's own thoughts is an unaffordable luxury in a country covered with relay towers. But this is not the end, it is only the beginning. There are still so many places in the world where Heimdall towers are yet to rise into the skies, and so many countries yet to learn about Evan Redgrave. Replacing the wise leader, is that not the pinnacle of a ministry career? The name Redgrave was respected before, but now it inspires awe. Isn't that what you wanted for your son, Father? Isn't that the greatness you dreamed of when you created Heimdall? Evan sits at the top of the world, and everything belongs to him, from the mountains and rivers to the people and their thoughts. He alone decides what his subjects can feel and want. Evan Redgrave is a god now, and what does it matter that the fate of all gods is loneliness? A low pulsating hum droned through the city, filling the air, boring into every mind and bending every single person to its mechanical will. Men and women, adults and children, rich and poor. In just a few minutes, the entire population submitted to Heimdall's power. From then on, people thought, felt, wished, and did only what was required of them. Luxury, senseless and merciless. Marble statues, palaces of golden toilets for officials, Persian carpets, mountains of jewels and money, full pools filled with champagne and caviar, monstrous orgies. The atmosphere of greed and a rotten system drowning in corruption. People stopped seeing anything wrong in it. The worship of one idol over another caused no kind of conflict. The signal from the relays took care of that. The wise leader was replaced by the luxurious leader, and no one noticed. Evan no longer denied himself a thing. Luxury, wine, parties and girls filled the void in his heart. And although he always felt second-rate next to his boss, being God's number 2 wasn't so bad. And all you need to do is abandon your ambitions, bury the memory of your father, and learn to shut your eyes to the problems of ordinary people. So let the champagne flow like a river, and may the music never stop. Turn it up louder. Let it silence the contempt that you feel for yourself at the bottom of your heart. A low pulsating hum droned through the city, filling the air, boring into every mind and bending every single person to its mechanical will. Men and women, adults and children, rich and poor. In just a few minutes, the entire population submitted to Heimdall's power. From then on, people thought, felt, wished, and did only what was required of them. It's scary when a real psychopath comes to power, and it is a nightmare if his power is limitless. But there are no words to describe the horror when this maniac gains control of your mind. In the hands of DeSalvo, Heimdall towers spread across the country, but they didn't just force people to obey. From time to time, they transmitted a single emotion at full capacity: pure horror. Beside themselves with fear, people would increasingly hole up in the deepest crevices they could find, like mice. They had less and less time for anything useful. An atmosphere of impending doom, bordering on panic, reigned in the country for a long time. DeSalvo didn't appreciate the gesture. Of course, he gladly took control of the relays, but that didn't change anything for Evan. The boss didn't trust Redgrave, so he got rid of him as soon as he had what he wanted. Evan was accused of conspiring to overthrow the regime and arrested on the spot. The overzealous police officers, already under the influence of Heimdall's signals, beat Evan mercilessly, screaming, "This is for DeSalvo." He was dead before the firing squad even arrived. A low, pulsating hum droned through the city, filling the air, boring into every mind and bending every single person to its mechanical will. Men and women, adults and children, rich and poor. In just a few minutes, the entire population submitted to Heimdall's power. From then on, people thought, felt, wished, and did only what was required of them. The relays quickly spread across the country, and citizens were processed into biomaterial to create clones. Copies of the ideal employee, once known as Carl Stein, replaced ordinary people, first in Helmer, then throughout the country, and then, step by step, all over the world. And next, the conquest of the solar system and the stars. A perfect, effectively functioning world has no room for strife or war, hunger or injustice, love or compassion. Weinberg didn't appreciate the gesture. Of course, he gladly took control of the relays, but that didn't change anything for Evan. The boss didn't trust Redgrave, so he got rid of him as soon as he had what he wanted. Evan was accused of conspiring to overthrow the regime and arrested on the spot. The overzealous police officers, already under the influence of Heimdall's signals, beat Evan mercilessly, screaming, "This is for Weinberg." He was dead before the firing squad even arrived. A low, pulsating hum droned through the city, filling the air, boring into every mind and bending every single person to its mechanical will. Men and women, adults and children, rich and poor. In just a few minutes, the entire population submitted to Heimdall's power. From then on, people thought, felt, wished, and did only what was required of them. Heimnitz deceived Evan unshamedly. With the relays at his disposal, he spread them quickly throughout the country and immediately carried out his plan to destroy the population. People dutifully lined up at the euthanasia centers, and when there was no one left, the Boreans came and took everything they needed. The once great country became a desert with the frightening, empty streets of a ghost town. Evan wasn't able to see it through to the end. He was only able to marvel at how quickly his fate had been decided, and regretted that Heimnitz didn't find enough soap for his rope. At least he wasn't around to witness one of the largest genocides in history, and the destruction of his family along with it. Over time, the huge relay towers became a familiar part of the urban landscape. Slowly turning rusty and useless, they hung gloomily over the heads of everyone below. And though some said that the towers were only slumbering, still waiting for their master, no one ever found out what they were really built for. Little changed in the country. Ministers continued to fight over power. Old players were deposed by new ones, each more vain than the last. A lack of principles became a synonym for success. Ordinary citizens remained a bargaining chip in political games, small cogs in the soulless machine of total surveillance and control. Evan's sacrifice wasn't in vain. None of the ministers who so passionately wanted unlimited control over the minds of the citizens were able to have it. Who knows how much worse things could have been if Heimdall had fallen into the wrong hands. But in the final seconds of his life, Evan still thought, could things have turned out differently? Was there ever any way for me to change something for the better? A series of terrible explosions shook the city. The relay towers became colossal columns of flame, falling on residents' houses and destroying the streets below. Violent fires raged for several days, and when they were finally put out, the heaps of twisted iron and sad memories were all that remained of Project Heimdall. Little changed in the country. Ministers continued to fight over power. Old players were deposed by new ones, each more vain than the last. A lack of principles became a synonym for success. Ordinary citizens remained a bargaining chip in political games, small cogs in the soulless machine of total surveillance and control. The ruling elite had no use for Evan. After the protective dome disappeared, he was held at gunpoint and thrown out the same window his father had fallen from. Like father, like son, they shouted at him in a mocking farewell. And only during that fall, in a state of absolute terror, did Evan truly feel free for the first time in his life, even if only for a fraction of a second. A low, pulsating hum droned through the city, filling the air, boring into every mind and bending every single person to its mechanical will. Men and women, adults and children, rich and poor. In just a few minutes, the entire population submitted to Heimdall's power. From then on, people thought, felt, wished, and did only what was required of them. The desire of an abstract common good embedded into the minds of citizens had unexpected consequences. As it turns out, everyone has their own idea of good, and this meant that people strived for different, often opposite things. A wave of unmotivated violence swept through the city. People attacked one another at random, sincerely believing that they were doing it for the common good. When the wave of violence subsided, leaving behind it blood-soaked streets, the few survivors, shaken to the depth of their souls by the incident, started building a better world. And they did it with such fervor that they forgot about their own basic needs. After only a month, Helmer was a ghost town where even the most desperate did not set foot. Anyone who understood what was happening and who still had free will wisely fled the city, while Evan stayed on the top floor, witnessing the consequences of his choice day after day. Sometimes in moments of weakness, he thought that punishing himself with the monstrous sight of the massacre below was enough to atone for his sins, but soon there was no one left to whom he could repent. And so the thought of the shredder several floors below seemed more and more attractive to Evan every day. But what mattered was that the thought was his own. A low pulsating hum droned through the city, filling the air, boring into every mind and bending every single person to its mechanical will. Men and women, adults and children, rich and poor. In just a few minutes, the entire population submitted to Heimdall's power. From then on, people thought, felt, wished, and did only what was required of them. You can't force a person to be happy against their will, but what if you forcefully give them free will? What if you instill in them a single thought? From now on, you make your own decisions and take responsibility for your own actions. Could it bring about peace? The inhabitants of Helmer were the first to become truly independent. Even though their lives weren't perfect, their choices were often far from ideal, and the consequences of these choices were painful. But they had their own choices, their own happiness, and their own mercy. The ministers, all of them were executed. The monstrous and useless bureaucratic apparatus was gradually dismantled, and the ministry building was turned into a museum dedicated to senseless cruelty. Evan became a full-fledged member of the new society. When asked about what happened in the last days of the great state, he would only smile and stay silent. He had no wish to recall his time spent in the ministry or the nightmares that he witnessed and took part in. Evan lost himself in real work and finally reunited with his family. Until the very end of his life, he tried to erase from his memory the faces of his superiors and colleagues, wishing fervently that he could stop hearing military marches in the distance and the roar of 1,000 voices chanting, "All hail the wise leader."
So thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below and have a nice day. See you.